I don't think I found my voice until I started writing romance. I write tenacious, strong females. Like that's me. And I think that definitely comes through in my writing of my characters.
Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book, Now What? Where writers chat about writing. My guest today is Tobie Carter. She writes suspense and contemporary romance. She had so much amazing insights into the publishing industry, both traditional and self. It's great. Let's get into it. Hi, Tobie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
So what made you decide to write a book?
I was actually rocking my youngest to sleep while my husband was deployed one year, and I was like scrolling through Instagram, and I had seen a picture of the lock bridge that somebody had posted, and a story came into my mind, and I was like, man, what was the name of that book? Like, I couldn't figure it out, and it stayed with me for weeks. And I searched for this book, and I asked friends, I'm like, what is the name of this book? I just couldn't figure it out. And eventually I realized that it was a story that I was supposed to be writing. And I had never had any previous, I was good at English. I'd won a few contests way back in the day in high school for certain like term papers, but I never thought that I would have like a story to become a novel. So I sat down and I laid out a story. It was a suspense story back then, a thriller. And I found a community and kind of got involved that way into learning how to write books and learning what genres I like to write. And that's kind of how I decided to become a writer.
You write romance now, right? How did you go from
I do.
thriller to romance?
I had written a few thrillers and suspense stories when I first started in 2018. But in 2020, my husband, we lost his brother. And then, like 6 months later, we lost my brother. And I was like, I need to take a step back from, murder and death and all of that. And all of my suspense stories actually had the romance thread already through them. So I was like, you know what, let's see if we, can kind of shift. Like, I didn't want to stop writing. I didn't want to lose the creative spark in me, because of course I was looking for something to give me happiness. So that's how I ended up writing romances, after those two losses. I was like, I need a little break.
Yeah. I've also turned to romance needing like just some levity in my life, in my head, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's that thing, what's going to happen, that there's going to be happiness, even though we might go through this stuff, there's still happiness at the end. So I think that was kind of what I was looking for when I first made the shift.
And when you sit down to write, do you plot out your novels or do you just like take them as they come? What's your process like there?
Ooh. So I used to be a pantser. I used to just sit down and be like, okay, I have this idea. Let me write towards it. But I found that I was taking more time editing and rewriting because I didn't kind of have that basis. So for me, I like to, I first, like, I have my characters, and when a story comes to me, I kind of think of like, okay, so what's kind of behind these characters' actions? So I figure out my character's goals, motivations, and conflicts, and work those into like each chapter. So I do plot now, and I think it really helps me kind of get the words on the page a lot quicker, a lot cleaner, and helps give me that kind of direction going through. So it's like I'm not sitting here in front of the computer being like, where does this need to go next? Like, I already know because I'm building on their motivations and goals.
How long does it take you to plot a novel? Do you plot the whole thing and then start to write, or do you plot as you go?
So I plot the whole thing before I go, before I start writing. So, I mean, it could take me a couple days to plot a novel. I have two different like plot sheets. So I have one that focuses on their goals, motivations, and conflicts. And what I do is I think of the three, I would say they're misbeliefs in their wounds. So like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what happened in their past to make them, be relationship averse? And I figure out what happened, and then I figure out three times that like notion of, getting into a relationship means getting hurt. And I figure out three ways that that's kind of been pressed on, and why they have this belief that's kind of like stuck there. So once I have those, it's kind of like I shift into my other sheet, which is my beat sheet, to hit the like romance beats. And I'm like, okay, how do I weave those 3 points in so that the reader understands, why this character has this kind of hang up, and how we're breaking that down each chapter. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how it happens for me. But it only takes me, I'd like to say a few days, depending on like which sheet I'm doing, but overall probably about a week to plot.
You're quick.
I
Whenever
I
I sit down
am.
to plot, I find myself just getting stuck.
Yeah, I am. I write fast. I write super super fast if I had the time. Now, granted, I have a 1-year-old now, so I'm not pumping out 10,000 words a day anymore. Like I
Oh my gosh,
can.
10,000 words a day?
I used to be able to do that,
That's
and then
amazing.
I decided to have another kid. But
Well, congratulations, and I'm
yes.
sorry.
Oh, no, no. It was great. I mean, I think there was one day that I was able to. I wrote 12,000 words that day. I mean, and it
Oh
was
my
a very
gosh.
big, heavy scene, but it was just one of those ones that kind of flowed. And I sat in front of the computer all day. Like, I think my husband brought me a plate of food and some drinks, and he was like, "Okay, peace. See you later." So no, yeah, I try and write about at least 1,000 words a day if I can, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. How do you fit that in with your life? Do you do it in the morning or do you just sneak it in here and there?
So, I at this point I sneak it in here and there. Like I try and get up. My kids are up for school about 6:15, and I am a morning person, but I don't like to get up early. So I'm like, if my husband has to be up early for school, for work, so I'm like, if I somehow get woken up, then I'll get up and I'll write, or I'll come down here and like try and piddle around and set up my day to be like, okay, I need to do graphics for this book that's out and post this, and then I need to check these emails, and then I'll start to write. But I usually try and get my writing done when it's nap time at this point,
Mm-hmm.
or at bedtime. So
And you mentioned getting your graphics and all that thing because you're a self-published author, aren't you?
mhm. Yes,
So you do everything.
I do. I do. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that was like self-publishing? Because you self-published your first novel this year?
Yes, I self-published my first novel in March, and that one, the bottom line, that was a that originally I had went to into traditional publishing with. I had a literary agent, and we were going to be getting ready to go on sub, and things just ultimately didn't work out. So I made the shift to self-publishing, and I was like, you know what? There's plenty of information out there, and of course, the Discord groups have, other authors always want to help other authors. So there was definitely a wealth of knowledge that I could tap into to figure out how to self-publish. I feel like the biggest thing for me was internal formatting and figuring out like the logistics of how to get on Amazon, and how to get in Ingram, and how to get my books into bookstores and Barnes and Noble. And that's that was a big thing. But it's like, once you know those things, it's second nature. Like, okay, I need to get this up on this, and this. And they're easy to check off boxes. But for me, it's the marketing that is, I'd say, the most time consuming and stressful for me
Mm-hmm.
personally, because I'm not super artistic in the sense of like creativity, drawing art. And I feel like you need a little bit of that when you do marketing, graphics, and everything. So that has been probably the hardest part of self-publishing for me, is keeping up with the marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot.
it is.
can I ask you what it was about your traditional publishing journey that made you decide to go the other way? Was it not a good relationship with the agent, or was it not a great sub experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little wonky, but it really boiled down to communication and editorial differences. I'm somebody who needs a lot of communication, and I think that's not every agent can provide that, and not every agent wants to do that either. There are some agents who just want to be like, okay, like, here, I'm going to send you this. I don't want to hear from you until this. Or there are some agents who are like, yeah, if you have a question, check in with me. I'll whatever. I That's really what it boils down to, is what type of communication do you want? Can the agent provide that? If they can't, and it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. I actually, and as far as when it comes to sub, I didn't actually make it onto sub with this book, because we split before that happened, which is actually a blessing, because had this book been taken out on sub, and who knows what would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have another deal, through, with this agent, and she's awesome. She's super, super kind, very easy to talk to. Like I said, we just didn't work out communication wise, but it fell through because of the publishing house. Had nothing to do with my agent or me. It was just the publishing house did cuts, and unfortunately my deal got revoked.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it was definitely devastating, because it happened during the Simon and Schuster merger and when
Mm-hmm.
Paramount took over. So it was kind of one of those things that you think, you're like, oh, I finally made it. I have a book
Mm-hmm.
deal, and then it's all gone because the ink wasn't even dry on the deal yet. So
Oh, that's terrible.
yeah, so I think I kind of just became like disenchanted with traditional publishing. Like, I was like, you know what? I only have to rely on myself if I do self-publishing. And,
Mm-hmm.
my deadlines are my deadlines. I can push them, I can pull them. I saw this video where somebody was talking about, like, you know, being excited about the place you're in. Whereas, like, as self-published authors, yeah, it'd be nice to have a traditional deal, and to know you're going to get this advance and this marketing budget and a publicist and all that. But with that also comes, hey, you no longer have, um, you know, the final say on your book cover. You don't get to say who you want to have for this, or, I mean, there's deadlines, and it's like, be happy with where you're at. So right now I'm happy with where I'm at. And, if my book eventually gets big enough and traditional wants to pick it up, hey, great, but
Mm-hmm.
for now I'm kind of hanging out with self-publishing.
Nice.
Yeah.
And has it been a rewarding experience so far?
It has, because I feel like with self-publishing, you have a different relationship with readers, because it's genuinely you doing the marketing, you trying to get your hands in readers, onto their Kindles and then whatever. With traditional publishing, they have systems, they have influencers that they kind of funnel this to, and it's like, hey, those people can get out to their friends. So it's not as personal as it
Mm-hmm.
is when it comes to self-publishing. And I think I've met a lot of people, and even a lot of people here in my own area, that I would not have met, I don't believe, if I'd went the traditional publishing route. So, and I mean, for me, my books are lead title to me. I don't have to worry if they're going to get, kind of bogged down in a whole sea of other books that are being published by a publishing house. And since I'm not a lead title, like,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, self-publishing has been really, really nice. It's been nice.
That's great. And you just had a book come out November
Yes.
14th, it came out? Yes, Gnome One Like You.
Yes.
I started reading it. It's delightful.
Thank you. Yeah, that I had my launch event for that last week, and it was great. We had a good turnout. We sold out of all of the books, which, I mean, for me, that's an author goal, to be like, we have no more books here for me to sign or for anybody to buy. Like, that's awesome. That was like one of those author goal checkoffs for me.
That's amazing. How did
Mhm.
you set up the opening?
We have a local indie bookstore here in San Antonio called Nowhere Bookshop, and yeah, it's run by Jenny Lawson. So she owns the bookshop with, I think, a friend. I'm not sure who the friend is, but we have a good bit of traditional authors like Allie Hazelwood's in the area. And so she comes down for events, and so they have a big I'm going to say they hold a lot of events. A few of my other writing friends, Etta Easton and Gabriela Gomez, I went to their events and got in, contact with the bookstore, and I'm like, hey, like I'm an indie author. I'd love to kind of do my event here. And it didn't work out for the first book, but I was able to do it for the Gnome book. And like I said, we had an awesome time and sold out of the book. So
Yay!
yeah,
That's great. Well deserved. It's so far
thank
a
you.
delight.
Thank you.
So when you write your manuscript, you plot it out and you write
Mhm.
it when you can. When do you know that it's done?
A lot of people always say, "Oh, when I'm sick of it." Like, I mean, I for me, because I think it goes through so many beta readers and critique partners, and once it gets to a point that it's just nitpicky stuff, like, oh, rephrase this sentence, or there's a few typos, like that's when it's ready, where you're not getting people saying like, this doesn't make sense, or
Mhm.
you said this back on here but it never came up. Like, if the reader doesn't have any questions at the end that aren't answered, that's when you know that it's ready to at least go into like line editing or your last kind of proofread before it's ready to publish.
How many beta readers do you typically have for one of your projects?
So, as far as beta readers go, I usually have about 4 or 5, just people who I'm like, hey, can you read this and see if it's like enjoyable? Does it make sense? They kind of give me that first round of questions where I'm like, hey, were there any questions you had that I didn't answer? Was there anything that kind of was off putting to you? Anything that was confusing? So, I go through, four or five of them. And I don't do it like 4 or 5 at a time. I try and do like 2 here, get their feedback, and then do 2 more. Um, and then I send it to critique partners to kind of be like, okay, it's an enjoyable story, but I need you to help me make sure it's all kind of sorted out in the correct order, and that I'm not missing any kind of, say, writing beats.
And how did you meet
Yeah.
your critique partners?
I had met through Jessica Page, who is another thriller writer. She had reached out to me and said, hey, this person's thinking about doing something in the thriller writing community and is looking for a co-host. And I met my Thrills and Chills co-host through there, and she invited me into her critique group. So I've had
Oh,
the same critique group since I think 2018. So they
that's
read all my
awesome.
romance stuff, and some of them do romance too. So it kind of worked out perfectly. And then of course the discords.
Was that a hard transition? I also started writing like thrillers, mysteries, and then I moved
Mhm.
into romance. Was that a hard
Yeah.
transition to go to them and be like, hey, do you want to read this completely different genre than I was doing?
I think they understood, because all, like I said, all of my suspense already had that romantic thread in it.
Mhm.
And like every single one had some type of romance, and they were like, okay, like, we'll take a look at it. And they're like, yeah, you found your like kind of lane with this. And even with my romance, I try and weave in suspense in that sense of like knowing like what's coming next, like learning. It's a skill to know when to stop a chapter, to make
Mhm.
that reader to be like, I want to flip the page. And I think, that like suspense and tension can happen in any genre. So I think I kind of balance that, or at least tried to balance that in my romance.
Mhm. So, where do you find your inspiration to write your books?
I'm one of those people that I have like a never ending like notepad of books to write. Like, I'll be driving and I'll see something and I'm like, oh, I could see that turned into a book. Like, I mean, it could be something as simple as like you step on a leaf and realize it's the last leaf to ever fall. Like, I mean, it's just super random things like that I'll be walking and talking or driving or just hanging out, and something will pop into my head and I'm like, can that be expanded on? Or is that like a scene in a book? So yeah, I'm one of those people that have tons of books and just not enough time to write them. Yeah.
How do you decide on which idea to go with?
If I have multiple ideas that are kind of bopping around in my head, I will sit down and I will write the queries or like the query blurbs for each of the books. And then I will send them to my friends and family that are like, readers, and ask them which book they would want to read the most. Because at the end of the day, and most of the time, I get a lot of ones on this one. And I'm like, okay, that's the one I have the best grasp on right now. So that's the one I usually kind of flow to see like, okay, which one is more formed in my head. And I feel like when I do the queries and I send it to them, they can see that this book is more formed, which helps me be like, okay, that's the one I need to kind of work on.
That's a great way to do it. Have you ever felt stuck with your writing?
There have been a few stories that I've started where I'll get, a couple thousand in and I'm just like, I have no clue where to go with this. Like, I just have lost the thread of it. It doesn't happen very often. And that usually is like kind of an indicator to be like, okay, this is not the story you need to write right now. Um, so yeah, but I think because I plot and I usually do tend to have a good grasp on the story, I don't tend to get writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I am one of those people that I cannot move forward in a book. Like I cannot jump around to different scenes. Like I have to write through it. So it might take me a day or two. Like if I can't get the time to sit down and focus because kids and life, then it'll take me a few days to kind of get what I want onto the page. But yeah, I don't tend to deal with writer's block that often. No, I'm
Yeah.
like, where's the wood? Let me knock on some wood.
Knock on everything. So when you do ever have that, you just kind of write through it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try and write through it because with my plotting, I know that there are people who do like 15 pages of outlines. Like my outline sheet is like it would probably be like 2 or 3 pages. But I try and I write out the scene. So I'm kind of like, I already know where it's supposed to go. And it's really more about kind of putting dialogue into it and making us in scene. Um, so it's like I just referring back to that and being like, okay, if I can't figure out where to go, I need to go back and reread what I've already done and then
Mm-hmm.
look at what's going to be coming next and figure out how to merge the two. How do I get from this plot to this plot? Like it's not about just what comes next, it's like what comes 2 things from now.
What kind of beat sheet do you use? Is it one that you have made or is it something that you found in a craft book?
In 2022, I'd gotten into the Kiss Pitch 22 group, and my mentor Ingrid, she was amazing, and I'm pretty sure I got a beat sheet from her that she just kind of made me like go back and break down things and be like, okay, like not like reverse outlining, but I have done that, which I hate reverse outlining, but I know it works. But I kind of, yeah, I have I think it's like the Zara West romance sheet. I think that's what it is. But it's mixed with another sheet. I don't know who made it. I don't know how I came upon it, but I have it and it works for me. So
What
yeah,
was that mentorship program like for you?
that was that was awesome. I had like I said, a phenomenal mentor. I know that with every different kind of program or mentorship, not everybody has the same experience you do, and a lot of people did not have that same experience. But I had a phenomenal one, and my mentor is one of my best writing friends now. And you have those friends who, yes, you just do writing stuff with, and then those friends that kind of merge into real life, and their backstories and about their families. Like that's the type of writing friends that I have. So it was it was a great experience for me. It was very hard though, because it was like such a short amount of time to rewrite a book and to do edits and then do them again. And yeah, but it was fun.
Yeah, how long was it?
I think it was 6 weeks.
Oh, that
It
is
was like
really short.
6 weeks during the summer. You're rewriting an entire manuscript, and of course, she has a job, and I'm of course have kids, so it was
Yeah.
definitely chaos, but it was fun.
That's quite a challenge.
It was. I don't know that I would do it again, but yeah.
So how you have such a strong voice in your writing, and I really am enjoying it. How did you find your voice? Was it always there, or did it take a while?
I don't think I found my voice until I started writing romance. I feel like it was, I guess, when you really figure out like showing versus telling, and like active writing versus passive, which I still struggle with those things, but like when you have that kind of foundation and you know what your character's misbeliefs and wounds are and their hangups, and it forms like who that person is. Like, I write tenacious, strong females. Like that's me. And I think that definitely comes through in my writing of my characters, where they're like, I'm not going to let you do crappy stuff just because of whatever. Like, I'm going to call you on it. So I'd say, yeah, it took me until I started writing romance to kind of find that voice.
How many thrillers did you write before you turned to romance?
Um, 3. Yeah, I think I wrote 3. I queried I queried 2, and both of them had great agent feedback. And I had one agent who, I had 2 agents. One who was like, when I started writing romance, this agent has read every single full manuscript I've ever written. And it's like, I know in their head, they're like, you're almost there, Tobie. Like, you're almost there. It's just not there yet. And then I had another agent who was like, I remember your Paris story. Like, I still think about this book all the time. If you ever revamp it or whatever, like, please send it to me. But that particular agent does not rep romance. She's like,
Mm.
but yeah, I'm writing a psych thriller now if I ever get back to it.
Mhm.
So I still write the suspense and still run the thrills and chills chat on, I guess, X now, but we'll see how long that goes since everybody's making a shift.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder, a lot of things are shifting. Since you are self-published, I have heard advice with self-publishing that you should still stick to a genre.
hmm
Um, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think you'll try to self-publish one of your thrillers maybe down the road, or do you think that's sound advice, or is that shifting now that everything is shifting?
So for me personally, I will probably, once I get done this psych thriller, if it's good, I mean, like, who knows? It might not be good, but one,
I bet it
I
will be.
I plan to query this psych thriller, um, only because I do know that there are certain agents in my head that I would want to see if they would want it before I would self-publish it. Um, but then when it comes to self-publishing, and if I were to go that route, I think of like the people like Geneva Rose and Ashley Winstead and Darby Kane, Helen K. Demon. Like, they all write both romance and suspense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to stay in your genre, but I do think that it's not good to flip flop back and forth until you have readers that are familiar with your work. Because I think that there are some authors for me that are instant buys because I know I like their writing, and I would 100% take a chance on a different genre of theirs
Mm-hmm.
because I enjoy their writing and I know their storytelling. So I think that if you do want to be a multi-genre author, that you start in one and you stick with it for a little bit and then you shift into the other. once you have kind of that built-in readership, because I mean, if you're a good writer, readers are going to read.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I just recently read Geneva Rose's romance
mhm.
because I like her thrillers. It was cute.
Yeah, see. So I think it's, yeah, I mean, but who knows? There are some people who like to use different pen names, and or they go into the thought process of like, do you want, if I guess it also depends how far different like your genres are. So if you're writing romance, are you going to be writing sci-fi? Do you want your sci-fi people to see your romance, or it to be recommended through the algorithm? Because at the end of the day, if it has your name, it's going to be recommended with your other books. So then that becomes a, do you want to use the pen name? Do you want other people to find your stuff? If you're a children's lit author who also writes adult romance, you probably want a different pen name. You don't want kids looking up, your adult
Right.
romance. So,
Do you think you will use a different pen name if you write a different genre? Or would it just see what happens?
um, if I did suspense, probably not. I would probably still use Tobie Carter. And yeah, I think I'd probably use Tobie Carter. I mean, I have a couple fantasies I'd like to write, but like I said, I feel like once my readership is built in, if they want to go along the ride with me, they will. If I ever dip into children's books, yes, I will use a pen name, but that's probably that's the only instance I would think about using a pen name.
You mentioned that when you started to write, you got this idea kind of like when you were rocking your child.
Hmm.
And it's very similar to how I started to write, which was
Cool.
like, yeah, I was
Yeah.
kind of like breastfeeding and pumping a lot.
Yes.
And it's like, what do you do at 3 in the morning when you're pumping? But all these kind of ideas come in
Roll.
this liminal space. And I wonder if there's also something to, like, I know for me, becoming a mother made me kind of view the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that led to your shift to wanting to write a book at all?
In a sense, yes, because I think like my husband was deployed at the time, and I was finishing up a certificate program for like medical billing or something like that. And I think for me specifically, or and a lot of women too, as a military spouse, we get this rap of like, oh, they're just at home doing nothing. And I had my degree, we've moved a lot, and we had 2 kids, and I was like, man, like I'm not necessarily doing anything for me, like something that kind of brings me that joy. And because it took me so long to realize like what that picture kind of produced, like I didn't realize that these were stories. Like I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know the first thing about starting. I just knew that there was a spark inside of me that I didn't have prior, and it had nothing to do with me as a mother or me as a wife, but just me as a person. And I think that, when you're in the throes of motherhood, and I mean, we're in this for life, but, you know, for at least a solid 10 years, like everything is mommy, mommy, mommy. And the writing is just me, me, me. So I think that definitely was kind of produced where I was probably like, I'm on my own. I'm solo parenting. He's, thousands of miles away. Like I need something to pull me out of the water when I'm kind of drowning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
I feel the same, as it's like a brain space just for me.
Yeah. Like nobody else is allowed in here. Yeah. Hmm.
Thank you so much for chatting with me about all this
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm always like, I want to get on more podcasts and actually like get out there. I am such an introvert. And I know it's like, where it comes through here where you're like, oh yeah, you can talk and this, that. I'm like, I am in front of my computer with a document at least a good 12 hours a day. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone, but I love doing podcasts.
Well, you're really like, I would not have known you were an introvert at all. But I guess most writers have that tendency.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we wouldn't gravitate.
I ride that line between extroverted and introvert. Like when I need to be extroverted, I can, but I'm definitely like, my friends are like, if we know that we can get you out of the house maybe like once every 2 months. Otherwise, I'm in the house.
What books inspire you? Like not
Mm,
necessarily craft books, but just like books.
books. I do like to read, I say like fantasy books where I'm like, oh man, it'd be so cool to go into this world or have this skill. I don't know if I'm the writer that I need to be yet to write the fantasies that I want to write. So that inspires me, like when I am reading them, to be like, okay, like when I sit down to write my fantasy, like this is the kind of fantasy that I want to write or the kind of feeling that I want to produce with that writing. So fantasy, of course, romance, the like sweeping romances. Mine for the most part are they're not super light always. Like they deal with heavier topics and, real world stuff, but I do eventually want to write. I have a book that is definitely one of those tear jerking books.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, when I read books that make me cry, because I'm not a super emotional person. Like, that's one thing that I'm like, if a book can make me cry, I'm like, that's inspiring because I'm like, I want to be that writer for somebody else. I know that's horrible to say. I'm like, I want to make you cry, but I want somebody to be like, I need a gut wrenching book, and somebody's like, Tobie Carter, I got you. So
No, I can understand that.
mm,
I think one manuscript of mine made my critique partner cry, and she came and she told me that, and I was like, yes,
thank you.
I did it.
Nobody understands. I'm just like, yeah, you want your writing to have an impact on somebody so much that it left that imprint in them where they're like, oh, when it's talked about, they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's still fresh. So
Mm-hmm. Would you tell us a little bit about your newest book?
yeah, sure. Gnome One Like You it's a novella, so it's a holiday novella. It's set at Christmas time. It follows Dandelion and Winchester. They're old friends. It's her brother, and Winchester. They were friends 10 years ago, and of course, Dandelion and Winchester had a kind of start of a relationship that could have been, but some hurtful words and happenings kind of broke them apart to where she got sent away and he, ended up going down a bad path. But fast forward 10 years, Andy is a carpenter. She whittles gnomes, and Winchester is a lawyer. And Andy just got evicted from her workshop and she's back at her grandparents' bakery, just trying to save money so that she can sue her slummy landlord. And Winchester walks in, it's during a blizzard. So he's like, her car won't start, of course. So he's taking her home. And unfortunately, the weather just gets too bad and his house is closest. So he gets there and they realize his Nana is staying over for the holiday. And for Winchester, he's been trying to take over his family law firm. And his Nana's like, I'm not going to retire until I know you value something other than just your win loss streak. Like, I want to know that you're not just going to be consumed by this career. So he asked Andy to be his fake longtime girlfriend, and he will represent her pro bono in a case against the slummy landlord. So they fake date over the holiday, and of course, a bunch of shenanigans happen and chaos ensues when her brother shows up. But yeah, there's definitely healing. They talk about the past, they hash out, things that, you don't want to talk about, but it's like you have to if you want to move forward. And so it's a second chance romance, forced proximity, brother's best friend, all the fun things, only one bed, but it's super short and steamy, as you're reading. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's great so far. I love
yeah.
it. And fake dating is my favorite trope.
That's the first time I've ever done fake dating, and I'm actually
It's such a hard one to do, believably.
it is because it's like fake dating and like a marriage of convenience. Like you have to have a reason that is compelling enough for somebody to make a decision like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I am currently writing the companion novel to my first book, The Bottom Line, and this one's a mm, fake engaged, like fake dating, but
Ooh.
they're pretending to be engaged. So that one's been fun, and I'm like, okay, trying to feel my way through this, and yeah, I'm excited. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, thank you so much for being here and telling us all about your process. Do you have anything else that you would like to share?
Hopefully, I'll have another book coming out in February, and my next release is kind of planned for around Valentine's Day. So I'm going to be looking for beta readers and in the next like month or so, and then I'll do my cover reveal. And so this next one is also it is. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It is
Yeah.
a late husband's best friend. So it's a widower. Of she is a baker, and the husband's best friend is a carpenter. And she finds out that before her husband passed away, he bought her a bakery, and she has to work with the surly best friend um, to get it ready for opening. So that one I'll be putting out stuff for her in the next month or so to get it ready for pub in February.
Well, very exciting. I'll link
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. Now go write.